we're not equipped when we leave our academic careers, right? And we come into the early years profession, we are not taught about sensory. If we are taught about sensory play, it's about hands in the water table. And that is like, it's not even close to that.
Hello and welcome to Blooming Curious, the podcast dedicated to reimagining early childhood education through the power of curiosity. We explore the strategies that inspire a lifelong love for learning in children. So if you're an educator or a curious parent looking for creative, meaningful ways to engage children and move beyond the talk and chalk traditional classroom approach, then this is the podcast for you. Today on Blooming Curious, we have a very special guest. Veronica Green is an early childhood consultant and a mum to a neurodivergent son. She is the power behind Cultivating Confidence, an early years consultancy, and is in the unique position to advise educators how to create inclusive early years experiences and environments where children and adults can thrive. So Veronica, we are so honored to have you on Blooming Curious today. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I'm very honored that you've reached out and I get to share and learn together with your audience and community of educators. So I'm super excited to be here.
Great. Let's kick off with you telling us about yourself and how you came about creating your early years consultancy and what led you to this work.
Oh, that's a great question. So I became an ECE in 2012. And I have worked with children from infancy all the way to school age in a variety of different settings, from large centers, small centers. I was also an assistant director for a little while. And then I decided to operate a family day home as well. I wanted to still have my career, but I also wanted to be at home with our child. So over 3 years, I curated and thrifted a lot of our resources. And after we had our son, I opened up my day home and I did that for a couple years as well. And so during that time when I was running the day home is really when I found myself as an educator, because I went through all the turmoil and the journey of learning that our son is autistic and going through the diagnosis journey and being an educator and a parent and all the behaviors that I did not understand and being so overwhelmed with how am I going to support the children? How am I going to support my son as well? And I don't know what I'm doing. And so it was a long journey. And that's where I learned about sensory processing and loose parts play and the Reggio-Emilia approach all at the same time. And this really changed my perspective as to how I see the environment, how I view children, how I viewed my role and families. And I slowly, through learning and lots of trial and error, I started to create a very inclusive environment that worked for the people in my setting. So the children, myself, and my families. And throughout this time, I shared my journey on social media. And so I always shared all the provocations that I was setting up and the why behind them. And I was talking about our journey with our son as well. And I've always been very open around that journey. And so that seemed to resonate with people. And so I started to build an audience on social media through sharing these daily experiences that I had with the children and always my why behind my decisions. And that's what led to slowly being asked to have people wanted to come see my day home. And then I got asked to start doing workshops. And then I got asked to write a module for an online membership. And I did it on sensory processing and used my whole journey with that. And kind of just over time, I slowly got asked to do more workshops and I love doing it. And then I went full-time into consulting because it just what's worked best for our family. Running a day home was amazing, but it was really hard on my son, just having even a few other families in our home. And so we needed our home to be our home. And I thought about running a small preschool program outside of the house, but it just wasn't really a viable option. And so I went full time into consulting, and I've been doing that for the last 6 years. And I am so honored, and I will always be grateful that I get to inspire and support my fellow educators on a global basis, whether it's online or in person, through talking about my experiences with loose parts play, behavior, sensory processing, and sharing that and that has just been an incredible journey that I've had over the last 6 years doing that with the consulting.
Well, that sounds like a really amazing start. But tell me, Veronica, you used that word sensory processing. And for those that don't know it, could you perhaps just give a definition, so to speak, or for you, your experience of what is sensory processing, essentially?
Yeah, so there's a lot of misconceptions about what people think that is. So the first thing is I'm going to say is a lot of people think we only have five senses, when in fact we have many more. There's usually about eight that we need to be aware of. And so sensory processing is basically information from the environment, or it could be internal inside your body as well, like called stimuli that, as I say, goes through your different senses. So your body takes in that information through, could be like your tactile sense, which is like your skin. So it's your entire body, right? Not just our hands, it's our entire body. So your body takes that information in, and then it goes to your brain, and your brain has to go, do I know what that is? Oh, there's information coming in. Do I know what that is? Do I need to pay attention to it? Is it a threat? Is it something that I can ignore? Do I know? Have I ever experienced this before? And so it's processing that. It determines whether or not it needs to pay attention to it or if it needs to ignore it. And if it needs to pay attention and elicit a response, then it has to go, what does that response be? And so that could be, for example, is your tactile sense, your skin. You place your hand on a hot stove by accident. It's an instant reaction to move that hand out of the way, right? So that is the heat sensors on your hands feel that heat, that it's too hot. Your brain is instantly making that connection and going, oh, I know what this is. This is harmful. It's going to hurt me. I need to remove my hand from it, right? That's very part of your reflexes too. But it also could be like, another simple example I always say is when you smell fresh cookies being baked. So your olfactory sense in your nose is going to be like, there's a sensation coming in. I smell this. Your brain's going to go, have I smelled this before? Yes, I know what that is. I recognize what that is. And I'm going to elicit a response. It's probably going to be, I want to go eat the cookie, right? So your body, everybody processes sensory information 24/7. It is not just when we're playing with our hands in the water tables or the sand tables. It is everything 24/7. So even, for example, like when we have our environments with the children, if we have anything we put on the walls, whether it's decoration or artwork or anything, if we have it filled from baseboard to ceiling, every child has to take in all that information through their visual systems, and their brain has to decide, should I pay attention to it or should I ignore it? And if you're not giving the eye a break, then they're going to pay attention to it all. And that's when we can create an overstimulating environment, because they're constantly having to go, no, I don't need to pay attention. And it's done very subconsciously, right? Like, it's not like we are aware of all of that, except if you are very sensitive, it's going to create experiences for children that they won't be able to play. They won't be able to engage in things because they are either so overstimulated that their body doesn't feel safe. One more thing I'm going to mention is that it's really important to know that sensory systems, so we have 8 of them, and I'm sure we'll dive into what those other 3 are. Sensory systems develop just like our learning domains. We don't come into the world with our sensory systems already like set in stone and ready to go. So they are constantly developing, just like our language skills, our social skills, our cognitive skills, right? And if you think about it, if you are not feeling regulated and safe in your own body from all of that sensory information coming in from the environment, you are not going to be able to develop your language skills and social skills, because you're not going to be able to go into the block area because it's too loud, too crowded, too much stuff going on, too bright. And so if you don't feel safe in your body, that's part of that self-regulation, feeling safe in your body with all those internal sensations, then you're not going to be able to go and develop all of those other skills that we know that children do through play. So really, self-regulation, sensory processing is so, so important to learn about. And I didn't know about any of it until, out of survival, trying to understand my son while I was running my day home, I had to dive into that world and learn about all the different unique things that he was exhibiting that I did not understand, and all of the distressful behaviors as well, and what that meant, and how I was able to make very simple accommodations in the environment that worked for him and allowed me to support everybody. And sensory processing is not just for children who are overstimulated or understimulated. This is beneficial for everybody because we all have these sensory systems. They all have to develop. It's just some children need more support than others.
Okay. Now, I want to just say right up front here that as a teacher, I always have felt that I have never been equipped to deal with children with sensory overload or sensory sensitivities. I don't feel that we've ever been taught to how to deal with these things in our classrooms when we're still having to have all these other kids as well. So I really want to learn all this stuff from you today. And I know that there'll be people listening that are also desperate for information and help with this. So you said 8 senses. And to me, that was already, what do you mean 8? What are these other 3? Because I don't know about them. So do you want to please expand on what these other 3 senses are and how we as not just teachers, but as parents can also help these children?
For sure. So I'm going to answer that, but I also want to circle back to the really important thing that you said, that you are not, you don't feel like you're equipped for it. That is very true for most of us. I wasn't equipped either. The only reason I went down this path is out of survival for my son. And the reason I say it that way is because there were so many behaviors that I did not understand. And what typically happens is we see these behaviors as the child being bad, as I'm using air quotes right now, bad, or the parents aren't on board, or they're just beyond our abilities to care. And I went through a time where I went, well, I can't kick my own son out of my program. I have to figure it out. I have to. So that's where my educator as researcher mindset was really helpful. And I dove down, plus a very supportive, my own mother, bringing up the idea of sensory a few times. And we can talk about the journey of accepting that there's something else going on as well, and what that looks like. We are not equipped when we leave our academic careers, right? And we come into the early years profession, we are not taught about sensory. If we are taught about sensory play, it's about hands in the water table. And that is like, it's not even close to that. But I wasn't equipped either. So I had to figure it out, and using a lot of trial and error and learning that really, and making a tons of mistakes along the way, because I had to feel like, is this going to work? Yes or no? And then I would see. And so I wanted to just say that I didn't really just, I didn't magically just have all this information in my head. I wasn't equipped either. I had to learn it as well. So I'm trying to normalize that, to be like, no, the early years profession is not educated enough in sensory processing. It's slowly changing, but it's not enough yet. Okay, so the other 3 senses. We know the 5 senses, right? Tactile, visual, oral, olfactory. I've first forgotten the 5th one now. I have to see it in my head. Audio. There we go.
Audio.
Auditory. Okay, so we know those 5 common ones. There are 3 other ones. They're big words, and they took me a few years to be able to say so eloquently now. Okay, so the first one is proprioceptive. So the proprioceptive sense is, and I'm not an OT, so this is how I explain it in like the most simplest form. And I learned all of this from books that are written by OTs. So the proprioceptive sense is basically your body getting input in your muscles and joints. And that helps your body know where your limbs are in space. And what I like to say is that's the example of heavy work. So pushing and pulling, running and jumping, that constant heavy work. We know that toddlers love to fill up a wheelbarrow, put a bunch of rocks or whatever there is, and they're going to push it around the backyard, or a box, they're going to things and drag it, right? They love to do those kinds of things. And for a lot of children, for most children, that kind of heavy work is very calming in their bodies. And I think we also have a misconception around sensory processing, is that we think self-regulation is equal to calm. which calm is interpreted in society as no movement and quietness. But really, calm to me and being self-regulated is being happy and able to handle the different emotions that you're experiencing, and all those kinds of things. That's what being calm is. And so how do children get that? They get it through heavy work as well. So it could be more active play, but it's actually very regulating in their bodies. It helps them stay regulated. They need more of that heavy input. So some children can be seeking, which means they need more. And some children can be avoiding, which means those sensations are really uncomfortable for them. Sometimes those sensations can cause pain as well. And so they might avoid experiences like that because just that's how their sense works. So the proprioceptive sense is getting impact into your muscles and joints. So heavy work, pushing, pulling, jumping, things like that. Then there's the vestibular sense, and this is very much related to your inner ear. So balance. There's a term that is used called gravitational security. So this is about you feeling safe in your body to be able to get up and move about in your environment. Okay. And so for some children, they might seek out this. They love to spin. And that active play is actually for them calming. So for example, before I get to that, the other thing with the vestibular sense is that you can be in like that spiral rotational direction or more linear direction. So back and forth or side to side is also engaging the vestibular sense. What's really helpful way to understand this, let's think about infants. When we go to comfort infants, what do when they're crying? We rock them in a linear direction back and forth. We're engaging in that vestibular sense as well. They might be getting some proprioceptive sense too from us carrying them. They're getting that weight on their bodies and tactile sense as well, right? Because their bodies feeling the pressure of the senses. And so when we engage in a linear direction, for most people, because I never want to say it's 100%, for most people and children, that's very calming for them. So children will naturally try to seek out the things that they need to stay regulated, but society perceives them as not socially acceptable behaviors a lot of the time. So here I'm going to go to my example. Think about children getting ready for going from circle time to lunchtime. Typically, we send them to start getting their hands washed, right? Before they go sit down. Now, some rooms, we tried to stagger it so there's no backlogs. But what if a line appears? A line comes and there's a bunch of children waiting to wash their hands. And you see a child spinning or jumping, spinning around in the line. We see that as disruptive behavior sometimes. But in reality, it could be that they are feeling uncomfortable or they're getting overstimulated by having to be so close to these other kids, the anticipation of waiting for their hands to get washed, or they're a little bit angry because they're hungry, waiting for lunch to come. And so spinning is their way of actually calming themselves. But it looks like it's, and I'm using a lot of air quotes here, disruptive. There's always a reason why behind the behavior. There's always that reason. So that's 2 out of the next 3. The last sense that most people haven't heard about is called the interoceptive sense. And so this is an internal sense where it's about you being able to understand the different sensations inside your body when you are hungry, when you are thirsty, when you need to use the bathroom. Are you hot? Are you cold? Do you feel pain or don't feel pain? Some people feel pain more intensely than others. And again, I always like to say again that these senses develop. So this leads me to again, air quotes, socially acceptable milestone of using the washroom by a certain age. And whether or not that is developmentally appropriate or not. So sometimes there's programs that require children to be using the toilets independently by the time that they're 3 and then they can't enter, right? But this is a sense that has to develop, and being able to understand what all of those different sensations are inside of you is confusing. Example, right? as adults, a lot of us have learned to understand the pain that we're feeling in our stomachs. If you're you're thirsty, or if you're hungry, or if you have gas pain, or you need to go to the bathroom, right? Those are all very different sensations. And we've learned how to understand them. But children are developing these things, and they might not have the words to be like, oh, I feel bubbles. No, I feel stabbing pain. I feel cramps, right? Like they don't have those words yet. They're developing that, but it doesn't mean they're not feeling those sensations. So when we ask children to use the toilet by a certain age, they may not recognize what a full bladder feels like, or when it's only partially full, or the sensation of when they need to have a bowel movement. Right? Like they might not understand what those sensations are yet, but yet we have these rules where it's like, no, once they're 3, they need to use the washroom, or they can't enter our programs. Now, I know that's not every program, but it is out there.
Yeah.
Or
that's true.
Expectations of children. You're 3. Why can't you do this yet? Right? So it's like they have to develop. So those are the 3 other senses as well, beyond the 5.
Yeah, that just rang a lot of bells for me, I have to say. So I was just thinking back about my own teaching practice and children that have been in my own teaching practice. So when you were speaking about the heavy one, which is the proprioceptive, you know, for many teachers, and I remember having a child, and an OT came in to help me with a child and gave me all these aids that could help. Things like the weighted blankets and stuff like that. But now I was just thinking, sometimes I guess those kids, a weighted blanket can be a solution to help them, but sometimes they really need to do heavy work in terms of maybe things like push-ups or carrying a heavy pile of books or something like that, right? So I guess as a teacher or as a parent, you don't really know which one of those is best suited to that kid unless you actually have a go and see how they react. Once you've given them that task or that intervention to see, is this how they respond? Is this what they will respond better to? So I guess as we were talking before recording, we're learning on the job. So as much as I've always felt really like a fish out of water, and I think really I always felt like I wasn't prepared well enough. I always felt like, gosh, they're expecting me to be a specialist when really I'm just a GP in this situation, you know? And I think I was really being hard on myself because I felt so bad that I couldn't help these children. But now I'm thinking, it's just a matter of just trying trial and error. You just try all these different things to see which one this child really resonates with, or which one really helps this child, because I guess nobody really knows what is their stimulus until you can find something that calms them down. And when you say calms, means that they're happy and they feel safe in that environment.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Is what I'm saying right there?
Oh, you have hit the nail on the head. You have got it. So that is what makes behavior so challenging, is that they are just as unique as the child. If it was simple to be like, here's 5 steps to solve all behaviors, we wouldn't have to take a bazillion hours of PD around it. We're never going to eliminate behaviors. That shouldn't be anybody's goal, because it's never going to happen. It's about understanding how is my environment impacting through these different senses as well, plus my own mindset, right? Mindset plays a big role around behaviors too, my relationships with the children. But that's what makes behavior so hard, is because what works for one child might not work for the next child. And even within that child, what worked one day might not work 3 months from now, because they keep developing. So you keep having to adapt your strategies. So yes, this is very, very difficult. However, though, what I will say is when you start to build this knowledge around sensory processing, and I really want to reiterate that I did not learn all of this in one night. I started with one sense because I had some observations from my son, and he was constantly rubbing his head on the floors of the doors and the walls. So not a distressful behavior, but a unique behavior that we were like, why is he doing this? And it wasn't like once in a while. It was every day, multiple times a day. And we're like, why is he doing this? And my mom kept bringing up sensory processing. And just quick caveat there, it took me 18 months to finally go, okay, there's something going on I need to look into sensory processing. And my mom is someone who I love and trust. And that's someone who's being an ECE and a parent. I still had a hard time accepting that there was something else that I needed to look into. We can talk about that more in depth. But so when I was learning about the tactile, his rubbing his head, I went, oh, he's seeking out that tactile sensation on his head all the time. I hadn't learned about the proprioceptive sense yet, because that's also getting that impact too, right? But I was thinking about this tactile sense, because even though we learn information and compartmentalize, so we learn to learn information through different senses, right? There's 8 senses, so we learn about each sense as we go, but our senses are integrated. So it's never just one sense that's impacting things. It's about us trying to understand it through these compartmentalized views. But when I learned that he was seeking it out, plus he was constantly touching and scratching things all the time. And so my big aha moment was I learned about the tactile sense, and I went, oh, so he is not getting enough. He needs more. And I went, okay. So I DIY'd a sensory pathway where I taped down a piece of felt. I taped down, I think, some bubble wrap, and I taped down, I think, some old DVDs and a couple other things. I just painter's tape and taped it to the floor. That's all I did, like these little squares, right? A little pathway, a little walkway. This was around 18 months. My son, it was on a weekend, so it was just me and my son. The day home wasn't open at that time. But he was on that sensory pathway for about 5 to 10 minutes at a time, every 20 minutes. That's how often he was on there. He would be bear walking. He would be and he was always barefoot. So he'd be bear walking, crawling, running, and he'd be rubbing his head as well, or just touching it. We had the most calm day that we've ever had, because that's how much tactile input. And now that I know it's also proprioceptive, but that's how much he needed to feel calm and safe. And so my environment was not giving that to him, because he was seeking it out through, the only way I could keep him calm was through giving lots of massages, lots of back rubs, lots of leg rubs. And I'm like, well, I can't do this. I can't sit here and give him a massage every 10 minutes. That's what I had to do. I'm like, this isn't working. So I was like, how am I going to do what I promised the families and these children? And I'm sitting here, and I say in air quotes again, managing this behavior. That didn't work. So that was very eye-opening as to like how much he actually needed, and he was seeking it out. And again, it wasn't a distressful behavior. No. It was what they would call a quirky behavior, right? Like something quirky, something different. People would think it's weird. But I went, why is he doing this? And so I put more sensory pathways, DIY'd them in my day home environment so he could access it where he needed. And the other children used it too, and he was able to get that tactile input that he needed. He loved having just aluminum foil. He loved a big piece of aluminum foil, and I know it's not environmentally friendly, but it
can be recycled. That's okay.
Yeah, and had that coolness as well. So because the aluminum foil has that coolness to it, it's got a cool visual thing. It's got a nice sound to it. Like he just loved lying on it, and he didn't like to wear socks or pants or things like that. And he was a toddler. He was 18 months when I started my day home. So, but he needed all of that tactile input. And so, so the only way I learned that was from diving into books and through trial and error. I had no idea what was going to happen when I put that little sensory path out, but I was curious, right? Curiosity is not just for children. Behaviors are a curious moment. That's what they really are. They're supposed to spark our curiosities and go, why is the child doing this? Is the environment impacting it? Is it my mindset? Is it something that I don't know about? And it's okay to be like, why wasn't I taught this in college? Why wasn't I taught about this topic? Because it's so eye-opening. And so just through trial and error and over years, because I learned each sense at a time, I really did that. And I had to integrate my information, lots of mistakes along the way, because he'll tell you if it's working or not. You'll try something. If he doesn't even gravitate to it or want to touch it, or it doesn't calm him down, that's his way of communicating that this strategy isn't working. And so then I'd have to try something else. But a lot of research and trial and error.
Okay. And really, we as the adults and as the teachers, which is really why this podcast is called Blooming Curious. And that is exactly what you've just said. We are the ones that need to be curious. We have to be curious about what's happening? How can I do better? How can I change this? How can I get through to this kid? How can I get this kid to be curious? How can I get this kid to be calm, or whatever it is, right? I want to just touch on something that you actually mentioned it before, and that was the environment. So we've got children sitting in classrooms, 20, 25, 32 kids sitting in classrooms, and all of them have different needs. And then within that classroom, you will have now specific children, and increasingly so, that have increased sensory needs. And you spoke about the environment and how that really influences us and how that can trigger us. It can calm us down, can make us more anxious or whatever. I want to know from you, as an expert in this field, if you had to give teachers inspiration and you had to give them advice on how they would set up a room to be able to cater for children, especially with sensory needs, what would you consider basics? Like, what must teachers have or not have? I'm thinking more it's the not haves in their classrooms to accommodate. So if you were thinking, this is how you set up a classroom so that you can actually accommodate all children, but specifically those children with increased sensory needs.
Well, that's a big question. So I guess
For me, it's less
design.
is more.
Yeah, there's some design principles that we can think about as well. I always like to take a very holistic approach to things. And I truly, truly believe that the most important thing before you change anything in your environment, you have to look at your own mindset around behaviors. Because if you have a view that children are doing this instead of having a hard time, nothing you do in your environment is going to really, it's not going to be as beneficial as it could be. So if you believe that children are giving you a hard time instead of having a hard time, that's the first thing that we need to look at. And I learned a lot from Dr. Ross Green, who's the author of The Explosive Child. He's also done a documentary called The Children We Lose. He also runs an organization called Lives in the Balance. All of his information is free on his website. It's wonderful. But he always starts with mindset as well, and going, if we have a view that kids do well if they wanna, that us as educators, we show up in those situations very different. Our motive is to make them wanna do better. So that's where like rewards, punishments, all that kind of stuff comes into place. But when we have a mindset around that kids do well if they can, we show up very differently. We're going to go, what's getting in their way? What is the roadblock to this? Is it sensory? Is it the strategy that I'm using? Is it my expectations of this particular child? Is it a learning domain skill that they are struggling with? That's that curiosity. So I always like to use 4 different lenses to try and view behaviors through to guide my thinking, because it can be really hard to deal with these, to understand these behaviors. I don't even like to use the word deal. That's not the word I choose. Understand the behaviors to keep moving you forward. So the 4 lenses that I always go through is safety. Does the child feel safe in the environment? That's through their relationships, beyond just a roof over their heads and food in their belly. What's the relationship like with this child and the family as well? Is it sensory related? Are they seeking or avoiding within those different senses? And then as well, those expectations is another lens. Do I have the view that children do well if they can? Dr. Ross Green talks about that behaviors are really unsolved problems. And when we have that curiosity mindset, we can really dive into the why behind it. And then the other lens I view behaviors through is this part of a learning skill, like a domain? Is it a language difference? Is it a social skill that they need support with? Like that's how I guide my thinking, because I don't know exactly what, and it's probably a little bit within all of that. It's never just one particular thing that's creating the behavior. It's probably a multifaceted thing, because human beings are multifaceted, right?
Yeah.
Children are amazing human beings. They have these full experience of lives. And as much as adults are told to leave our stuff at the door, children do not. So if they are experiencing food insecurities, if they are watching their parents have fights at the end of the day or Families are struggling. Who is not struggling right now to pay for groceries? It's a global thing, right? Like it's insane. So children are going to bring those things into the environment. So it's not just sensory. Sensory is one lens to view things through. So I know I kind of went off on a tangent here, but before you change the environment, you need to think about your mindset. Do you have the right mindset? Because that impacts the kind of strategies that you're going to use with children. So that's why I really wanted to mention that. Then if you have the view of kids do well if they can, and I'm going to get to the why behind it, then if you look at the environment, you can use those different 8 senses to go, well, am I providing enough tactile stimulation? Are there different textures through pillows, through fabrics that they can access? What about like paint? Can they paint on their body? Some children love to do that. It's okay to get, in air quotes again, messy. Like, can they experience those things holistically beyond just their hands? Visually, what do I have on the walls? Why is it on the walls? Does it need to be there? Because that is providing visual stimulation. Again, their brains have to decide whether or not to pay attention to it. So if our walls are filled with pre-done posters and not just their art, because it's wonderful to have their art on the walls, how much documentation do we have up? Why is it there? Because that's going to impact their ability to focus on their play if they're too overstimulated. The auditory, how loud is the environment? Can I have quieter spaces further away from louder spaces, right? Like usually the block and the drama area are loud, dynamic spaces. Do I have a quiet space available for children to go and get reprieve in their day? As adults, what do we do as ECEs? Where do we go to get reprieve in the day? We're going to be honest here. We go to the bathroom. We go to the bathroom so we can have some peace and quiet and get out of the room for 2 minutes, right? It happens all the time because we're looking for a little we're just a little overstimulated. Where do children get to do that in our rooms? They need that too. And some children need it more. What else? What else? Other senses are there? They're like oral, right? Snacks. We talk a lot about sensory safe foods. Can we provide foods that we know that they're going to eat? Because you can't just make a kid eat a new food. They're not going to just eat because they're hungry. That does not work when you are very sensitive to those particular textures that can make you gag, that can make you vomit. And we have to remember, sensory processing is not just some uncomfortableness. It can cause pain. So an example, when I learned about it, your auditory part of your brain is right next to your pain receptors in your brain. So that's why, have you ever experienced really loud noises and it's very painful in your ears? Yes. That's because those parts of the brain are very close together. Another thing is with the visual thing with lights. Let's talk about lights, how bright those fluorescent lights are. Can we have more natural light? Can we have dimmers? Can we have some of the fluorescent lights on and some of them off? Can we take some of those bulbs out? Let's just take them out so we don't even need, do we need them? Because those are very hard. They're very harsh on our eyes and they can be overstimulating. And when you think about that, if you've got all your walls full of stuff, you've got all the fluorescent lights on, you've got all these loud areas, so much stimulation, right? And for a lot of children, that's going to be too much. And they're going to walk in with their hands over their ears. They might be crying more. They might be like refusing to go to a certain area. They're like, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to do that. I don't want to wash my hands. I don't want to wear that smock. That's all a tactile experience, right? So it's analyzing our environment through the sensory systems when learning about the avoiding and the seeking. And so we can talk about some really great resources that are out there to help guide you as you're learning about this, because there is a lot of information. And so you need resources to help you. One of the books that really helped, there was 2 books that really helped me. One was called The Out of Sync Child, written by Dr. Carol Kranowitz. It's a much more technical book, but it is a good book. So it's not the easiest read, but it is a good book. The other book that I highly recommend for educators and parents, it's called Sensory Processing 101. And it goes through they have 7 senses in there. I don't know why they didn't do their interoceptive sense, but 7 senses are in there and they have perspectives from educators and they have perspectives from parents tons of hands of ideas, and they go through each sense individually. So that would be a great tool to use to like analyze your environments through that, right? And it helps you understand some of the behaviors that you might be seeing. And as I mentioned before, behaviors are not only distressful behaviors. Behaviors can be running, jumping, avoiding, withdrawing, or even like the ones that my son was doing, right? Like the constant rubbing of his head or the constant touching of things that we might just think are quirky behaviors. Behaviors to me are like actions.
Veronica, this is such a huge, huge, huge area. I think we need to have you on the podcast every week or every month or something because I just feel,
There's a lot,
gosh, there's
yes.
just so much to know and so much to
Yeah.
learn that as you were talking, I was actually starting to feel overwhelmed. And I also thought of the environments that I've gone into, the individual classrooms that I've gone into. I think we're all on a spectrum somewhere, but I go into some spaces and I think, I got to get out of here. It is just too much for me. It's just too much going on. There's too much noise. There's too much stuff on the walls. I feel overwhelmed. So you can just imagine what kids must be feeling. And I think as educators, I loved how you said, we really have to think why. And I particularly took me back to a moment where I had a specific child with really high needs. And I didn't even know what the hell I was doing. Okay. I really didn't. But I did realize that this child needed his own space. And so I created a little nook under a table. I put a net over, I put different types of cushions. And I remember there's this one kind of cushion that has the sequence on and you can move it in different directions. And kids love that thing. And also play things that they can squeeze with their hands and little fairy lights. And it was just like a little safe space, a quiet space in a corner where he could go if he felt that he needed to. And so thank God, at least I knew that one little thing. But there's so much for teachers and parents to realize with children. And of course, it wasn't just him that needed that space. Very often during the day, other children would go into that too, because things became too much for them, being with friends all the time or whatever was going on. They needed that reprieve, I guess, as well. So I think as educators, it's so important to ask ourselves, and I've done blog posts on that, how to set up environments in your classroom, because you want them to be, I have to be careful because you want to say stimulating, because we've always thought that we need to stimulate our thinking, stimulate our minds. But actually what you want to do is provoke curiosity. But at the same time, your environment also has to enhance calm and feelings of calmness / happiness in children. So this is a massive learning area because, as I said in the beginning, we are not as teachers taught how to handle these things. We learn on the job. So, and thank you so much for recommending these books, which I will put in the show notes for people. But we spoke about in the beginning, you said about parents, that even for you, it took you 18 months to accept that something was going on. And I know that in a classroom environment, we often, as educators, will see some things not quite what we consider average. And you would then say to parents, look, something's going on. Have you considered this? Have you considered that? And it even sometimes things just like dyslexia or reading or language issues. And very often as a parent, we all want to believe that our children don't have issues, right? We all want to believe that our kids are fine. So sometimes it takes a lot for a parent to accept that they need intervention, some kind of intervention.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for educators and how we can help parents to get to that point, but also for parents, you yourself as a parent and an educator, you're in such a unique position. What advice do you have with respect to seeing those behaviors and realizing that your kid needs help?
Again, all I can do is speak from my experience. But what I always like to say first is we have to meet parents where they're at. It's a journey. And so we have to consider what contributes to the ability to accept mindset, education. There are cultural aspects as well. Many cultures see neurodivergence as something that is not, it's not accepted. So there's many different things that we can't just have the mindset around, again, if we have the mindset that parents do well if they can, then we show up differently with them. And I have the same thing with educators. Educators do well if they can as well. If you don't have the knowledge, then you're gonna iMessages and redirection are only gonna get you so far, right? But you're gonna keep doing that because that's all you know. So I truly believe that parents do well if they can. So if they have new knowledge, then that might change their perspectives. So for myself, my experience, I was in ECE for years before I had my son. And I naively thought that because I was in ECE, being a parent would be a little bit easier. My son really changed that for me. It's very different when it's your own child. Yeah. And so I already had knowledge and experience, right? And even at 7 weeks old, my mom, who I love and trust, I'm very, very close with my mom. We actually moved back to Winnipeg to be closer to my parents. And my mom is an early childhood music educator. She has worked with children her entire life as well. And this is someone who I love and trust. And at 7 weeks, when I came to visit, she was like, I wonder if there's something sensory, because she had learned about this new perspective. And she goes, it should be easier to calm him. It should be a little bit easier to settle him. And I was like, no, I think it's just because I'm a new mom. I think it's because I'm overwhelmed and I don't know what I'm doing. And she just let it go. She was like, okay. And then over the course of I don't know how many more months, I'd be calling her in tears at home going, Mom, is this, and I used these words then, I wouldn't use them now, but is this normal, Mom? Is this what's supposed to be happening? And she'd be like, no, sweetheart, this is not a typical experience. He should be easier to settle. It shouldn't be this difficult. And then she gently brought up again, I think there might be something sensory. So we as educators do not use those official labels of autism, ADHD, nothing like that. That is not our jobs. We can talk about sensory needs. We can talk about simple accommodations that are required for their child to stay self-regulated. I think that's okay. But we are never to bring up the word autism or ADHD unless maybe the parent does. And even then,
I agree.
That depends on my relationship with the child, with the family. But so she brought it up again. And I was like, no, I don't think so. This is probably around 6 months. Again, she brought it up around 12 months. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I was just doubting my own abilities or thinking it was going to get better, And then around 18 months, I was running my day home. And it was just over that. We had to go into early intervention program because he wasn't walking or talking enough yet. And I was running the day home and I was in tears and sweating like crazy just to get my kid in a new diaper and a pair of shoes to go out the door for summer. And I have been a practicum student getting 15 toddlers into snow pants. And that was a breeze compared to this. And I was like, it shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't be this hard. And that's when I think there's something else going on. So I saved my story because we cannot expect to talk with parents at the end of the day when they're coming to pick up their kid and they're busy and bring up something super important one time and think that they're going to be on board. As well as those conversations, how those conversations go starts from the tour of your center, even your website when they're starting to check things out. How do you talk about, how do you handle, how do you understand behaviors? I don't like those words, handle and dealing and managing. I don't like those words. Understand behaviors. How is your tour going? What's the relationship that you are building with families right from the moment? Are you telling them how awesome their kid is every day? Or are you only speaking to them because they're biting or hitting or running or not listening? Right? If that's the only time you're ever talking to those families, when you need to go and have a conversation about, here's some observations, we see some sensory things or these particular things going on. Have you ever seen that happen at home? What are you experiencing? How do you create that safe environment for families to open up and share their toughest, darkest moments with you about how they didn't handle those situations well as parents, and try not to feel judged sitting across the table from an early childhood educator and director, because that's what they're going to feel. And so then how can we create that safe environment for them to say, yes, my child does have 45-minute meltdowns multiple times a day, and I have no idea what to do. So I just hand them a screen all the time because that's what I had to do. But not every environment is safe. So how do we build those relationships with these families so that if that conversation does have to come, it's a very different dynamic. You cannot expect to start having conversations with families if you've only ever talked to them about tough things right from the get-go, that you can't expect to have these kinds of conversations with them without doing all the work beforehand. And we have to meet them where they're at, right? And so it took me 18 months with some knowledge and experience and from someone who I love and trust for my entire life. So us as educators, how long has that family been in your program? A couple weeks, months, years, right? Like this is someone who I've known my entire life. It's my mom. So, and I still took 18 months to get off the fence. Some families are going to be more open to it. Some may never get there by the time that they're in your care. However, though, the child needs help. The child still needs support, whether if they choose to listen and when they are ready to listen and to get a referral or whatever that looks like, we still have to remember that that journey of getting a referral and going to see the pediatrician, never mind, we could talk about my experience with the pediatrician and if they believe you. And even though I had all this paperwork from OTs and PTs and child psychologists, and so it's quite a journey to wait to get on a wait list,
Exactly.
to
It
get
takes
an
at least a
assessment,
year.
and then you're waiting for that appointment. The child and the family still need support during that. So this is why I said earlier, like I had to figure it out. When I started all the behaviors, I was not thinking about autism. I was thinking about how can I understand these behaviors? I did not understand them. And sensory processing was a different lens that opened up my perspective. It was through us being in the early intervention program. As I just mentioned, we had speech pathologists come, we had an OT, we had a child psychologist come. And so through those conversations and having a child development supervisor or a person come to my house once a month, that's when we started to explore the idea of him being autistic. But I didn't start there. I started with these behaviors that I don't understand. And my mom never said autism. She only ever brought up the idea of sensory, because we all have sensory. Now, some people might that might even be a triggering word because sensory things are definitely talked a lot more about children around neurodivergent people. But as we've now learned, everybody has these sensory systems.
Yeah.
We all have little things that we like, that we prefer. We all have different sensory preferences, but some people need more or less and more or less support with it.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is. That's what we can focus on.
Okay. Veronica, before I really do think that we need to have another episode, because this is such a massive field, and I really believe that we as educators and parents really need all the help we can get. So I'd love to have you back on. But before we go, can you give some help to teachers in how they balance the needs of sensory sensitive or neurodivergent children with the rest of the classroom so that all students can be engaged without feeling overwhelmed? Is there advice that you can leave teachers with in how to handle all these children simultaneously?
Yeah, that's a great question because it is hard. So I always like to take a very holistic view to things. First and foremost, you need to take care of yourself as an educator. You need to be able to stay self-regulated as well. If you are not regulated, you're not going to be able to show up in those moments and lean into your values, lean into the kind of educator that you want to be if you are not regulated. So taking care of yourself is very important. The next thing would be is that mindset piece, right? Making sure that I'm viewing children as that they are having a hard time and not giving me a hard time. Looking at your environment And how is it providing stimulation? Is it too much, too little? What simple adaptations can I do? I did not spend a ton of money. I really DIY'd a lot of it. I slowly invested in some pieces that did work. But I did not spend a lot of money at first. Knowledge really is power. It really is. Oh, the other thing, very, very important. It is not favoring a child to provide the resources that they need to develop. Oftentimes, we think when we're in group care, whatever that size looks like, is that if we're doing it for one, we need to do it for everybody. That is not true. Individual needs are how the world goes, right? We don't want to be generalizing. We don't want to make assumptions because that leads to biases and not proper care. When we view children as individuals and we provide what they specifically need to develop, like example, we're not going to give everybody a wheelchair, but we're going to give the child that needs a wheelchair a wheelchair. So it's not favoring giving them the resources that they need to develop. My son was not developing his language skills, his social skills, his cognitive skills, because he was so dysregulated. He was not able to go and play because he felt so unsafe in his body. Your sensory nook that you were describing, I did that for my son as well. And that was his safe place. The other children respected it. They knew they could go and play there, but they also respected that that was his space if he needed to be alone as well. And so it's not favoring when I'm creating an environment that suits the needs of the people that are in it. And when I did that, when he had his safe place and the things that he needed, it freed up my time and to stop managing behaviors and go and be able to actually support and facilitate the play for all children, because my environment and my mindset started to work together instead of against me, which is really leaves me in that dealing and managing aspect instead of supporting and facilitating, how I can put my mindset, the environment to all working together. And that's when we slowly started to find our way, is when I was able to make simple accommodations and not seeing it as favoring, because it was my son. Sometimes I get asked that. I'm like, I'm not favoring, I'm providing what he needed. And I would do that for any other child.
Thank you very much. That is really good advice. And I love what you just said about mindset. And I think that is really important. And that's the one thing that perhaps sometimes holds us back, is that some of us don't stop and just have those thoughts and ask those questions as to why and what should I be providing. I love that.
Yeah.
Veronica, I am definitely, hopefully, if you agreed, getting you back to speak more about this topic. But I'd love you to just tell people, where can they get hold of you, and how do you help them on your website?
Yeah.
Just give them all those details, and what do you provide for educators in terms of help?
Yeah, so I have an extensive website. It's at cultivatingconfidence.ca. So there's a blog with lots of information, more on sensory processing, behaviors, even connected to sensory processing and like planning and things like that, because it benefits everybody. I have lots of free resources on my website as well. I have like a free guide around behaviors that talks about those 4 different lenses that I was talking about. So I'm all about providing supportive tools and training for ECEs so that they can feel confident in what they're doing and use a child-led approach and know who they are as educators and feel inspired and supported to keep growing in their own practice as well. And I also love talking about loose parts play. So you'll find lots of stuff on my website but there's also connections between loose parts play and sensory processing. So
that's right.
So yes, there's lots of stuff there. So there's the website has lots, and then you can find me on social media as well, on Instagram and Facebook, Cultivating Confidence as well.
And I'll leave all the links in the show notes so everybody can get hold of you there. Veronica, thank you so much for being on Blooming Curious today. It's been an amazing journey to learn more about how we as educators and parents can understand, I had to be careful about that word that I was going to use, can understand children with different needs. So thank you so much for sharing this with all of us today. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure many listeners would appreciate you talking about this as well.
Thank you so much for having me.